1. A few years ago, my husband found a 3-bedroom bungalow that was cheap to rent. The owner who inherited it was a friend of my husband. This guy's father had passed away the previous year, and the house was sitting empty that whole time. The owner didn't want to live in it, and he didn't even bother returning to the house to remove all the furniture, clothing, or belongings from it either. I didn't even get a chance to see the place before we moved in. My husband sprung it on me last minute after our apartment lease was up. It looked okay from the outside. The windows were dark, but of course no one lived there. Once my husband opened the door and switched on the light in the foyer, I felt that this place wasn't empty. I felt like something was in there watching us right away. I knew the original owner passed away, so I just figured that I was just spooking myself that first evening. The whole house was full of furniture, knickknacks, personal items, clothing, and it was dark and dusty. I was depressed looking at it all. The part of the deal for cheap rent was that we had to clean it all. We got a truck and cleaned out the majority of the house. We kept some things like the almost new couch, armchairs, TV, and end tables. We kept the master bedroom furniture in there because the mattress was new. The bedding and furniture was new. It hadn't been used yet. My husband traveled for work. He left me there alone, and that is when I experienced things that were odd. That feeling of being observed didn't go away. I stayed in the front rooms because there was better light there, and it's where our belongings were. The back part of the bungalow was always dark. The first thing I noticed was scratching sounds in the wall. It's Texas, so it could have been any animal doing that. I heard what sounded like walking along the ceiling. I remembered one day I was watching a movie. There was this loud stomping up there. I was distractedly thinking to myself, damn, the neighbors are loud. Then I remembered there wasn't any upstairs neighbors. I ran outside to see what was on the roof. Nothing. It really sounded like heavy footsteps coming from one side of the house to the other. I was nocturnal back then. I stayed up all night either watching live streams or painting the living room. I was in my bedroom watching an old black and white movie on TV this particular night. Outside I could see the pink dawn through the curtains. That is when I heard knocking. Just 2 sharp knocks in the upper left side of my bedroom wall over the bed. The bedroom was at the left corner side of the house. I wondered what it was. Then all along that side of the wall was a swishing sound. I pictured someone using a leafy branch just making swirls with it on the other side. Just a scratchy swirling sound. I hopped out of bed to see what the heck it was. It had to be people. I ran outside and over to the outside of the house, and there was no one. They could have ran away, I guess. It was so odd to me. This happened a few more times before I finally answered that knock with a loud hello. The knock itself sounded like a person's knock, intentional to get attention. Not like a tapping or something bouncing off the wall. It was 2 distinct knocks. There was a hesitation, then it knocked 3 times. I asked, "Who's there?" Then the knocking started going hard and fast. It sounded angry and loud. I took off to check the outside again. Nothing. Nobody was there. I went back inside, back to the bedroom. The frantic, loud knocking was now accompanied by that swirling sound, and had moved from the left side of the wall to the ceiling. That scared me. I called my friend, and then she told me that I was not supposed to even answer the knock or go outside for 2 reasons. If it had been a person scaring me, I could have been hurt. And second, whatever it was bad, and I interacted with it. It went on for nearly 30 minutes. I left the bedroom to go sit shaking in the living room while I chatted with my friend. She wouldn't accept any pictures or videos of it either. After that occurrence, I made sure to ignore all the noises, just act like everything was okay. The activity died down. We painted the back room, but it didn't seem to make it brighter. It stayed gloomy. When we attempted to sleep in the master bedroom with the ensuite at the back of the house, neither one of us could sleep. I was facing the bedroom door, and several times when I woke up, that door would be open again. I felt as though someone was staring at us from the kitchen each time. It was also very cold and uncomfortable in there. We moved away after a year. 2. Hi all. I'm reaching out because I believe there may be two spirits in my childhood home. A young woman in her early 20s and a boy in his early teens, and I'm not sure how to handle it. When I was younger, my older sister tried the Bloody Mary challenge with a friend, and she mentioned some disturbing things happened, though she doesn't want to go into detail. After that, my family went through a difficult time, and I spent a lot of time alone in the house. I remember being scared often, and I cried a lot. But I was never attacked by anything obviously paranormal, and as hard as those years were, I sometimes wonder if these spirits may have actually been watching over me in some way. Recently I tried psychedelics, and since then I've had some strange experiences. A couple of times I've woken up with sleep paralysis, seeing the shadow of a young woman's profile, or a young blonde boy sitting on my bed. I felt intense sensations, like a racing pulse, and only the hair on my head standing up as if it were cold. These episodes have usually happened in dim light, just at dusk. Another time, while coming in through the garage early in the morning, I felt an overwhelming sense of a woman around 22 years old, almost as if she was standing right there. I also often feel like I'm being watched from one particular spot at the end of the hallway by my desk. A few months ago, it got so intense that I called my 2 dogs to my room, and one of them growled and stood guard, standing at that exact spot. My girlfriend recently mentioned she feels scared in my house, saying it feels haunted. I shared my experiences with her, and while we were downstairs, just as she started to fall asleep on my chest, I suddenly felt hyper-aware and heard a loud bang from upstairs, followed by a quieter one near the stairs a moment later. It was like the occasional bangs and clicks happened at the speed of someone walking through the home. Then on the floor below, floor I was on, I felt like I was somehow seeing the hallway from above as if I was gliding. My heart was completely racing at this point, and I felt some panic coming along. I then sensed I was face to face with something. Suddenly a calm washed over me, and my heart gradually slowed down. I felt as though something was reassuring me. I felt very good and really calm. I felt like it was the girl's presence. It was definitely something pretty powerful, or I'm just sensitive now because of psychedelics. I'm conflicted about what to do. Part of me feels like these spirits might have been helping me through some very rough times, and I wonder if I should be more welcoming. But I also want to be respectful and safe. I've heard that saging can help, but I'm hesitant to disrupt anything if they've been a positive presence in my life. On the other hand, I feel very scared during sleep paralysis, and by that one spot, when I felt like something walked through me, I was also nearing panic. I know that the house has actually been cleansed a few times. Once a lady who was a medium was babysitting me at one point, and apparently pulled my older sister aside, demanding to know what she'd done. According to the medium, my sister opened up a portal, and about 8 spirits were actively wandering about. The medium apparently closed the portal, but I guess some seem to have still stuck around. Would talking to them be a good idea? Maybe letting them know I'm happy for them to stay if they mean no harm. I appreciate any advice on how to approach this. Thanks for listening. 3. For about 10 years, my family of 5 rented a house that we never felt was quite right. My wife and I and our son and 2 daughters. The house shared land with the trailer park, and my kids made friends with a lot of kids in the area. Over that time, the kids would talk about some things they experienced. They had lots of dreams that took place in the house. Mostly the dreams were frightening, but sometimes they were warnings. One morning, before heading to school, my oldest told me about the nightmare they had the night before. Then, when my middle woke up, she told me about the nightmare she had the night before. After school, I told them both together they had experienced a shared dream because they both had told me the exact same nightmare. Once my youngest had her leg pulled while sleeping, but thought her big sister was just messing with her until the following morning when she asked her about it. Things in the house would sometimes move or shake, but almost always just on the edge of vision, and we always try to explain it away. The kids would sometimes see a shadow person wearing a tall hat in their periphery. But they also insisted that there was something masquerading as a little girl, but they weren't sure if it was the same entity, taking multiple shapes. We bought a house in early 2021, about a half hour away from the old place, and moved out. Over the next few weeks, the kids, at that time they were 18, 16, and 14, finally felt safe, and they opened up to my wife and I about all the things that they experienced there. There was a lot that they didn't talk about while we lived there, and many more details shared about some of the things I mentioned above. It was now all out in the open, and hearing all three of them talk about things definitely made me a believer. But now they were just spooky stories, and it was all in our past. Or so I thought. Last night my oldest had a dream. They were talking to their sister or middle kid in our current house. They were just chatting, and she told him that she had to get some schoolwork done, so my son said goodnight and headed to their room. They closed the door, and their current room was gone, and they found themselves in the old bedroom, and were immediately uneasy as the dream turned into a nightmare. It ended when one of our current cats, who never lived at the old place, scared them in the dream by jumping out of their bedroom closet, which had always been a hot spot back in the day. He went to the closet door and slammed it shut, and immediately there were 3 hard knocks on the door from the inside. He manifested a lock for the door in the dream, locked it, and woke up. It was just after midnight, and he told me about them immediately. He was visibly shaken and teary-eyed as he told me about it, but felt better after getting it out. I got shivers as they told it, but told myself it could just be chalked up to residual trauma from the old house. But then this afternoon he mentioned it to his sister, and they started talking about the old house a bit. She mentioned that she was at a Halloween bonfire a few weeks ago with friends, and found out that one of her friends is very close with the family that recently moved into the old house, either the 3rd or 4th family that has lived there since we left. That friend told her at the bonfire that the family had just had a cleansing and exorcism done of the house after the mom started seeing a shadow man in a top hat. The timing worries me. The exorcism would have happened about a month ago, and now my oldest is dreaming of the place. I know that things can latch onto you when you leave a place, but it's been almost 4 years and there was nothing. I've asked my daughter to get the name of whomever did the work at the old house, and we may have a cleansing of our own in the future. I'm worried that the cleansing just kicked it out of the old place and freed it up to find its way to get back to us. I have no personal experience with cleansings, only what I've seen in TV or movies. Is this possible, or is it just a coincidence? 4. This happened in the mid-2000s, at a house my bio-dad rented. One Friday after school, my bio-dad picked me up to take me to his house for the weekend. As we were driving, he told me he'd found a house he was interested in renting, and that we were going to go look at it before heading home. It wasn't far from his current place, and initially I was excited to see it. My first impression of the house from the outside was that it was rather unassuming. It was an older house and had sat vacant for several years. It was a bit run down and in need of renovation, but nothing so bad that it wasn't move-in ready. It mostly needed a good cleaning and some optional updates. The landlord had bought it as a foreclosure sale. He said the previous owners walked away from the house, and not much else was known about them. I didn't notice anything off with the energy as we toured the house. The only thing that struck me right away is that there was writing on the walls with Sharpie throughout the house. A lot of it was just the same names over and over, but there were some weird symbols here and there, along with some things that were incomprehensible. Then he took us down to the basement. After showing us around, he asked, "How would you like to see the secret room I found?" The back wall of the basement had that classic 80s wood paneling on it, and part of it was a hidden door. When the opening side was held in place with Velcro, he pulled it back to reveal a small square room that was concrete from floor to ceiling. I couldn't see too well since it was dark down there, but we walked in and he turned on the flashlight. What I saw immediately filled me with dread that slowly crept through my entire body. The room was covered floor to ceiling with handprints, symbols, swear words, and God knows what else in white paint. I couldn't look long enough to fully take it all in. and the paint had dripped a lot before it dried. The only way I can describe it is it looked like someone had a bad acid trip in there with a bucket of paint and a ladder. The only way the paint would have gotten on the ceiling. There was another slightly larger room to the left of that which was totally empty and lacking the freaky paint. The landlord said when he found it, they were both empty besides a picture of a marijuana plant, and commented he thought it was a grow room. We left the house and I asked, "So we're definitely not living there, right?" He said no, he was asking too much money for the shape it was in. I was kind of shocked that was his reasoning, and mentioned the room and how it gave me a really bad feeling. He didn't seem to think much of it, but it didn't matter anyway since he wasn't interested in the house. We talked on the phone a week or two later to coordinate my next visit. It was then that he told me that he rented the house, and would be moving in after he picked me up. My stomach immediately dropped. I asked him what changed his mind. He told me he worked out an agreement with the landlord to do some work in the house in exchange for lower rent. I wasn't thrilled, but I moved into the situation with an open mind. He said he was going to seal up the secret room, but I refused to ever go down there again regardless. We moved in, and everything was normal at first. I left that visit without any occurrences. When I came for my next visit about 2 weeks later, we were leaving the house, and my stepmom told me to double-check the door wasn't locked. She said they had been locked out twice, which is weird because they never locked their door. It was chalked up to one of my sisters playing a prank, though they were awfully little to be doing stuff like that. Then things started to escalate. My stepmom would stay up late some nights playing games on the computer, and one night she saw a 7-foot-tall black figure standing in front of the door that led to the upstairs bedrooms, where me and my sisters slept. She was very shaken by it, and said the house is haunted. My dad does not believe in the supernatural at all, so he thought it was her imagination. I hadn't seen anything myself, yet, but I wasn't surprised considering the secret room in the basement. The only thing I had noticed was an unshakable feeling that I was being watched while in the shower. On my next visit, my stepmom took a shower and left the bathroom door wide open. I was a teenager, so I was really embarrassed and put off when I noticed. She had never acted inappropriately before, so I was unsure what to think. I played it off, but she later apologized for leaving it open and said she did it because she feels like she was being watched in the shower, but only when the door is closed. I let her know I feel the same, which of course deepened our belief it was haunted. On a subsequent visit, my dad picked me up and brought me to the house. When I got there was loud crashing noises coming from the upstairs. It sounded like someone was jumping around or throwing furniture. As this was happening, my stepmom and sisters were calmly watching TV as if nothing was wrong. Apparently this had been happening constantly during the day for over a week, so they had just gotten used to it. I was like, hell no! Remember that me and my sisters were supposed to sleep up there, and they had been during all this, which blew my mind. Too little to know what was really happening, I guess. They tried to assure me it was okay, and it only happened when people weren't up there. My stepmom was fully convinced it was a ghost, but didn't know what to do about it. My dad convinced himself a wild animal was somehow getting in, then disappearing when people went up there. The largest wild animal in that area is a raccoon, which couldn't possibly make the loud noises we were hearing. I called Bull, and he said he didn't really have an answer. I was too intrigued not to investigate. The moment I had the intention to go up there, the banging stopped as if on cue. I slowly climbed the stairs which led directly into the first room. When I got up there, it was clean and tidy, not a single thing was out of place, and our cat was sleeping peacefully on the bed. I was flabbergasted. How could this possibly be the scene I walk into compared to what we were hearing downstairs? I headed back down, and the moment I hit the kitchen, the banging started again. The upstairs was 2 bedrooms, and you had to walk through the first to get to the second. There was a storage space on both sides that ran the entire length of each wall, and one was missing the sliding panel to close it. My dad was convinced an animal was coming from there and leaving when he heard us coming. Seeing how freaked I was, he went and got a big piece of plywood and sealed the opening. After that, we never heard the banging again. Unfortunately, this just reinforced in him the idea that it was an animal. Other things continued to happen, and I'd have at least one experience every time I went. Most were at night upstairs after my sisters had fallen asleep. We slept in the big room, but in the summer we had to keep the door to the second bedroom open because it had the only window. I hated to leave it open, but the other option was to roast in the heat. I always got to feeling that I was being watched by something in the room, and would often be jarred out of sleep by ragged breathing in my ear or the sensation that I was falling. One night I was watching TV up there, and my sisters were long asleep. All of a sudden, one of their toys started making noise from the next room. I knew from the sound it was the fake radio on their Barbie car, but it kept going off repeatedly. I was really scared, but I decided to go in there and pull the batteries. It was pitch black dark in the room, so I flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. I tried a few more times, then resigned to the fact that I was listening to the car for the rest of the night, because there's just no way in hell I was entering that room in the dark. The next morning I went in and dealt with the toy. Of course the lights worked just fine and never had an issue again. The last major thing that happened to me was the most terrifying. One afternoon I was alone in the kitchen cutting up fruit. My stepmom was in the next room talking loudly on the phone. As I was cutting, I heard heavy footsteps coming up from the basement. At first I was unfazed. My dad wore boots all the time, and it sounded just like him coming up the steps. Then I realized he had just left to run to the store with my sisters, so it was just me and my stepmom at the house. The stairs were to my left, and the way it is laid out, you wouldn't see the person coming up until they came off at the very top step. I was literally frozen with fear, standing there holding a butcher knife. So many thoughts were racing through my head. Everything was telling me to run, but I couldn't move. I think part of me also wanted to see what was coming, like some morbid curiosity. I had to know. Whoever or whatever was coming stopped, suddenly on the top step, such that I wasn't able to see what it was. I guess I wasn't that curious because I ran out of the room to get my stepmom rather than peek around the corner. We checked the basement and the backyard. There was a patio door to it right next to the steps, and there was no one. After about a year, the activity slowed down, then stopped completely. My stepmom and I were relieved, but also wondered why. The activity had been slowly escalating, and I knew it is not the norm for it to stop out of nowhere. There weren't even any vague, lingering, creepy feelings. I felt in my gut that, for whatever reason, the activity was done and wouldn't start again. Around the time the activity stopped, my dad's descent into addiction started to accelerate. He'd been a functional addict for many years, but now he was not showing up to jobs and disappearing to the crack house for days at a time. Unfortunately, this was the beginning of the end for that part of my family. In the years that followed, my stepmom was diagnosed with brain cancer, and they ended up splitting. It was a horrible situation for my sisters, because my stepmom left them with my dad. Both my sisters went off the rails with no rules or supervision, and we eventually lost the older sister to addiction. Things were never great or particularly stable with them, but the couple of years in that house was when everything really started to unravel. I no longer speak to my bio-dad or stepmom. She beat the cancer. The last thing I wanted to mention. At some point, while we were renting, the cops came around looking for one of the previous owners. My stepmom, having nothing to hide, let them search the house and garage, and they didn't find anything. She got the impression that the cops thought we were hiding this guy or something. I didn't connect the dots until years later, but I wonder if some of what we experienced was actually that guy frogging in our house. I experienced too many things that couldn't be explained by frogging, but a lot of it could. The stairs incident in particular. I'm not really sure which idea is more terrifying, to be honest. 5. So about 4 years ago, my husband and I moved into our current house. For the first few months, we had a roommate, and while she was here, we didn't notice anything weird. But over the past 3 years, we have been noticing more and more things. I will be home alone at times and will see things out of the corner of my eye. What I usually see the most is, if the bathroom door is open and I am looking in the mirror, I will see a lady standing in the kitchen. That doesn't really scare me since I have lived in a few different places that have been haunted and have dealt with quite a few paranormal things. In the past year, it's gotten worse. My husband has started sleepwalking, even though he never has in the past. Our dog will bark at things that aren't there, and I can't find anything that he would usually bark at. He doesn't usually bark unless someone he doesn't know comes over. I have multiple times woken up with scratches, which could be me scratching myself in my sleep, but that never happened before living here. We hear whispering and footsteps outside our bedroom door at night. Our dog has also recently started having seizures, for which the only explanation the vet had was that it could be anxiety-related. I have dealt with some pretty intense hauntings, but nothing quite like this. I have tried cleansing the house multiple times, and every time it calms down temporarily, but it never sticks. And I don't just mean sage. I have tried countless types of herbs, candles, crystals, incense, moonwater, salt all around the house, and even having other people come over who know how to deal with spirits. I am not a beginner on this type of stuff. A lot of people have come to me for help with anything like this in the past. We live in the basement of a house and have had multiple upstairs neighbors since we moved in, and each one has separately said that they have noticed things. When we first moved in, our landlord mentioned that the previous tenants left after about a month of living here with no notice and no explanation. A few months after we moved in, right after our old roommate moved out, they were doing renovations upstairs and found a petrified cat under the floorboards. We have had different people come over to hang out, and multiple people have seen something standing in the same corner. We don't mention that the house is haunted, and anyone who comes over says they saw something. Even my best friend, who didn't believe in ghosts before, said he saw something standing in the corner. I always feel like I'm being watched. Even when no one else is in the house, I'm very receptive of energy and sense that whatever is here is malevolent. But I've been able to create at least a bit of a barrier between us. I would usually know what to do in the case of a normal haunting, and have successfully cleansed multiple places, but this is beyond my expertise. So any advice would be greatly appreciated. I also don't know if this is related at all, but I have an antique music box from Japan that I have had since I was a kid. When I got it, I didn't notice anything off about it, but when I started to pick up on energy, I realized that there is something attached to it. I've tried to get rid of it multiple times, but every time I try to get rid of it, it always ends up somewhere I will find it. The song is extremely out of tune at this point. It wasn't when I got it. And it will sometimes play on its own even if the box is closed, even if it's been years since I wound it up. I don't know if that is just adding more to what's already going on here, or if it's connected somehow. Any advice or suggestions would be much appreciated. I've dealt with a lot of things, but this is new for me. I'm willing to try anything at this point. I feel it followed me out of the house. Even one of my co-workers has told me that something has been following me. I try my best not to be scared, since that usually gives entities more power, but I always feel a bit on edge. For context, our house was built in the 1920s. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 403. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please like and subscribe, or lick and summarize, whichever works best for you. And please do support me on my Patreon. A little as $1 a month helps a lot. I'm a cheap date, what can I say? Right, no other business today, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what is a TV show you really enjoyed that you think they should just do a full remake on because it didn't get a fair whack? I'm going to go with Dollhouse, and the reason I'm saying a full remake on that, it was a Joss Whedon show, so maybe keep him away from it until he learns to behave himself. But the concept is good. Essentially, it's about people who have their memories erased and they become dolls, or actives, is that what they called them? And they would implant different personalities in them, and they'd go on different missions, and sometimes missions of a naughty nature. Prostitutes. As well as, like, actual out-in-the-world dangerousy things. It was a very good show, but it only got 2 seasons, and it got a very, very rushed, condensed finale. Wonderful cast, although obviously doing a reboot would have to get a whole new cast in there, but very talented people out there in the world, that shouldn't be too difficult. And it did bring Enver Yokaj to my attention, who is a fantastic and very versatile actor. He's like the male version of Tatiana Maslany. And if you've ever seen her on Orphan Black, you'll know what I mean by that. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And today's answer comes from Paranormal Stories 401 and is about what do you do when you're trying to get to sleep at night? What helps you get to sleep? And today's answer comes from Tiny Shamrocks, because their name is Tiny Shamrocks. I just turn on a playlist and set it to 50% speed and listen till it eventually puts me out. That's probably quite an interesting answer. Thank you very much for your answer, Tiny Shamrocks. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.